Yes, it's time for another transphobe, another specific person that's not being very nice online that I would like to react to. Ta-da! Welcome. Hey Spuds, how's it going? What's up? It's Jamie. I hope you're well. Welcome back to another video, or your first video, I don't know, but either way, thank you so much for clicking on it, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Today, I am coming at you, I'm bringing you some transphobia that we're going to watch together and to kind of just, pick apart the logic that doesn't exist anyway, but we're going to pick it apart, because people like to go on and be like, I don't like trans people for these reasons, and none of the reasons really make sense. So this video is basically about a transphobic feminist called Julia Beck, who was kicked off an LGBT plus committee, something along those lines, for sharing anti-trans views. And this was an interview she did about her anti-trans feelings and her feelings on being kicked out for being anti-trans and all of that stuff. And we're going to watch it together and react and hopefully not be too sad at the end.
So you said something that I think many people would in their hearts think is obvious, but very few people are willing to say out loud. You said it knowing you would likely be punished for saying it, but you said it anyway. Why did you do that?
Okay, I know she's not even spoken yet, but this is already posing it as a kind of like, you're so brave for doing this. Like, how admirable of you to stand up and share your anti-trans views despite the what's the word? Despite the negative reaction you could receive for doing so. Congratulations to you for being transphobic.
I believe in the truth. I believe that people should have these conversations and say things that matter without fear of punishment.
You are old-fashioned.
I mean, okay, I do agree that there is freedom of speech, and I think people should be able to speak out without fear in terms of, I believe that trans people should be able to live their truth and speak their truths without fear of transphobia and being rejected from society simply for being trans. But freedom of speech and speaking out against things does not always mean freedom of consequence. So sometimes there maybe should be a little bit of a consequence for saying certain things that may lead to a bit of a fear for saying those things because you're worried about the repercussions because you're saying something not very nice.
Why do you think, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm grateful that you have that attitude, but why do you think it was important to say this specifically?
Well, when we get down to it, women and girls all share a biological reality. We are all female. But if any male person can call himself a woman or legally identify as female, then predatory men will do so in order to gain access to women's single-sex spaces. And this puts every woman and girl at risk.
Some real nice misgendering going on there. First and foremost, trans women are women, so kind of starting that whole point of if any man at all can just call themselves a woman and go into the women's toilets and changing rooms, then they put all women and girls at risk is just rude. That's not what trans women are doing. Trans women are women and therefore should have access to women's spaces. Trans women have also been accessing women's spaces such as toilets and changing rooms for years, and there is absolutely zero evidence that an increase and an access of trans women in women's spaces leads to any increase in predatory behaviour. There is no link between the two. They're two separate issues. Trans women are women who are allowed to use women's toilets, and then there are predators. Trans women should not be used as a scapegoat of the main issue. It's frustrating.
That's from the beginning. I don't weigh in on this often because sexual politics is a morass and it's not worth it, to be totally honest with you, but I have enough daughters that I care, and my instinct has always been this change in our society, which we never debated, the terms have never been clarified, is not going to be good for girls in the long run.
It's constantly debated. Trans people's existence and rights are constantly debated in society. I appreciate a healthy debate, right? But the point is when you have somebody on TV like this, national TV, sharing their views like this, and you have an interviewer who is on their side, it then is not even a debate. It's just a sharing of misinformation and scaremongering against a group of people in society whose existence should not even be debated in the first place, but even if it is, should at least be allowed to speak for themselves and defend themselves. And that's not happening here, and that's one of the most frustrating things about this interview.
Do you share that concern?
I definitely do agree. Like I said, this puts every woman and girl at risk of male violence, and this is already happening in many states. In many states, men can legally identify themselves as female and gain access to women's single-sex spaces. And sports is just one institution where men are taking titles, scholarships, and this is a problem.
So it seems like a real problem. Why wouldn't women's groups who exist to carry the banner for women raise the alarm about this?
Women have been speaking out about this for decades, but we have been effectively silenced. Many women, like myself, have been pushed out of spaces that we built, spaces that are intended to include us, simply because we acknowledge biological reality.
Simply because you are being transphobic. The spaces, LGBT plus spaces, are also for trans people. So if you're going into those spaces and you're being transphobic, then that's not really going to be received very well, just as if somebody went in and was biphobic or homophobic. It's not something that is acceptable in those spaces.
Do you think, I mean, you're lesbian, you were in the same acronym as a bunch of other groups, including people who are transgendered.
Just didn't look happy about that.
People who are transgendered. Do you think that makes it more difficult for you to make this argument? I mean, it seems like this has been so politicized that you're expected to have a certain set of views that maybe you don't have.
I see where you're coming from. I would like to make a distinction here. The letters in the acronym share not much. The L, G, and B are based on sexualities. They're based on sex, biological realities.
Yes.
But
repeating biological reality does not make it a strong argument, and it does not make your argument based in actual scientific reality. I do agree that there are differences between the identities LGB and T, but I also agree that as a community we're stronger together, and if you're part of a group that includes everybody in the community, then you as a person need to kind of be inclusive in those spaces of everybody that is part of that space and part of that community. And mentioning biological reality when mentioning sexual orientation is a deliberate attempt to exclude trans people and kind of misgender trans people. It happens a lot where it's like sexual orientation is based on sex and biological reality, same-sex attraction. It's basically saying that like a trans man who's attracted to women and in relationships with women would be a lesbian, and that's rude because it's misgendering.
the T is based on gender identity, which is not based in biological reality. In fact, I would argue that it's opposed to biological reality. The LGB is very different from the T, and I don't think it's fair to lump us all into the same acronym.
Okay, I have a few things to say. Firstly, being trans and the fact that your gender can be different to your birth sex is based in scientific reality. It's a thing that can happen, it's true, so by just saying biological reality, it doesn't make your fluffball nonsensical arguments actually real. And I do agree that there are differences between the LGB and the T parts of the community, but what we can't forget is people within the T part of the community were pioneers of the modern LGBT plus rights movement, as in, you know, the reasons why we have pride and the reason why we are gaining rights as LGBT plus people in society. So you can't just be like, oh, we don't want to be lumped with them anymore, like let's just kick them out and they can deal with their own stuff. This is not me disrespecting anybody who has a belief that the LGB and the T should be separate in some way. I just really don't like it when people use transphobic arguments for that, as in like, I don't like the T, or like the T is not real, or one is based in biological reality and the other is not. Like, it's just all bull. And if you personally feel like they should be separate, then I'm not going to have a go at you. But if it's for transphobic reasons, then that's not cool. And I just personally think the community is stronger together.
Do you find it astounding that it is considered an act of bravery to defend biology?
I wouldn't say so myself, but I guess that's where we are right now, and I hope more women stand up.
Last question, because I can't remember. What did they say to you? You were thrown off this commission. You were punished for saying this out loud. What was the rationale for it?
Frankly, there was no case made. My accuser said that they didn't have to make a case. One of the members of my committee argued that sex was a thing of the past. He said, frankly, science had progressed so far that sex was unimportant. I argued the opposite.
Julia Beck, at a time like this, everyone thinks, so I would say what I really think, but most people are afraid to, and you're not. And I'm definitely standing in admiration of that. Thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
And that's the end of the interview. Let's discuss it. Trans women face many of the issues within society that cis women face. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And they also have the added component of being trans, and therefore often leads to increased violence against trans women. Feminism is important, and it's important for all women. And in my opinion, you're not a feminist if you're not standing up for all women, trans women included. This interview just came across as very unprofessional, frustrating. Nobody really knew what they were talking about. There was a lot of like biological terminology and jargon chucked around that had no basis in reality of what we actually know in terms of science. I would agree that somebody who holds these kind of anti-trans views does not belong in an LGBT plus committee. And finally, what I'm going to do is link to a great article about how we should stop using biology to be transphobic and using it in transphobic arguments, because it doesn't make sense and it doesn't have any basis in reality. Julia Beck clearly just has the belief that biological sex is all that matters and is all we should take into consideration. I would therefore assume that under her belief, I should be allowed to access women's toilets and changing rooms, and I should be viewed as being in a lesbian relationship. Oh, and also should be allowed to take part in women's categories of sporting events. How does any of that make sense? These arguments just don't work. And the sooner people realise that, the better. I hope you liked this video. Think about giving it a thumbs up and subscribing if you want to, but no pressure. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.